So if you liked Bon Jovi or were kind of into the 80s hard rock, heavy metal movement, I think you'll actually really enjoy this video. Now, in the 1980s, I just bought everything. I mean, and I was kind of a heavy metal kid. And so I was really into, Motley Crue when they first came out, when I first discovered them. I just loved them. And then anything like that in that style, I just gravitated towards, and I just would buy it, whatever it was. And although I was never a huge Bon Jovi fan, I still bought their stuff. I remember hearing Runaway for the first time, and I liked it. I thought it was such a cool tune. I was, what was I, 13, 14 years old when I first heard that song. And it was like, wow, that's a really awesome tune. The piano and the guitar hits and on the streets where you live, girls talk about the social life, whatever. Anyway, I was a kid and I loved that stuff. And then 7,800 Degrees Fahrenheit came out. And that's the one that had In and Out of Love. If you remember that song. It's funny now looking back on some of this stuff because it was kind of silly. I mean, it was catchy and it was fun. But, love him or hate him, Bon Jovi was a hard worker. He was a talented kid, and he knew how to make music that girls would like too, that was hard rock. And that album, 7,800 Degrees Fahrenheit, actually I bought it, but I didn't buy it for that song. I actually heard this song on there called Silent Night, and I don't know that I like it that much today, but for some reason, when I was 15 or whatever I was at the time, that song just resonated with me. So I bought that. Well, then, of course, in 1986, they really, people knew who they were, but they weren't Bon Jovi that we know today. They were just kind of another one of the bands in the mix of all the hard rock, quote, hair metal stuff that was going on. And then they put out this, and I have this particular cover, Slippery When Wet. And boy, this is the one that just... this is what made Bon Jovi superstars. This is the one that if they weren't really on the map at that point, this one, and the amazing thing about this record, and again, looking back on it, I don't go out of my way to listen to this stuff, because I just don't care much for it today, except in the right moment. And what I mean by that is, for some reason, this song, the song that really exploded off this album, of course, you know what it is. It's Living on a Prayer. Let's see, your third song on the first side, Living on a Prayer, right there. I don't know. I mean, for some reason, you go to any karaoke night anywhere in the world, and I mean that. I've been in Southeast Asia before on karaoke night in some nightclub, and somebody's going to be doing that song. It doesn't matter where you are. It's crazy. But this was that album. And it sold it had You Give Love a Bad Name. I think that was the first single they put out on here. Living on a Prayer was the second single. I think that was the second one. Anyway, they didn't really push that one until the following year. And that's actually what I'm going to talk a little bit about today. Then they had Wanted Dead or Alive, which then, of course, man, that one just also huge. Such a huge song. And then Never Say Goodbye, that ended up being pretty big. I think they attempted to make Raise Your Hands popular, but that one didn't really catch on, I don't think. Anyway, Slippery When Wet. Yes, I own it. It's this is the one I bought in high school. But what I wanted to share with you today is from a newspaper on November 11th, 1986. Now, this is not long after the album's out. And that was the year it came out. And this is before the Living on a Prayer had been released as a single, and really before it hit the radio and turned into what it became. So people knew who Bon Jovi was, but we had not gone into that explosion stage quite yet. It was coming, just a couple months away at this point. But what I found is an article where they talked to John Bon Jovi, and he just tells a little bit of, it's not very long, but I think you'll enjoy this. Even if you don't like Bon Jovi, I think you'll just enjoy this, because I kind of like Bon Jovi just as a personality. Because he was just, he was kind of a working class dude. And like I said, you got to respect the fact the guy was a really hard worker. And he put in the work. He put in the energy to make this career happen for himself. And for me, even if I don't like your stuff, I still respect that. And I don't want to diss his stuff and say I don't like it. It's just that over the decades, my tastes have changed a little bit, where I'm not as enthralled with some of the stuff that I was when I was a kid back in the 80s. And I'm sure a lot of you watching this video know exactly what I'm talking about when I say that. So Bon Jovi gives rock a good name. That's the name of this article. And I think you'll get a kick out of this because he just tells a little bit about the story of what it was like now as his life has made this big change as he's started moving into being a big rock star. So Jonathan Bon Jovi was in the pizza business. Quote, but they didn't understand the idea of egg-shaped pizza. I got fired, unquote. So he became John Bon Jovi, because that's how his last name should be pronounced and often wasn't, and got into a business where he is understood. He's a 24-year-old New Jersey hard rocker. Slippery When Wet, the third Mercury album by his five-piece band Bon Jovi, is platinum. It went to number 3 on the best-selling chart in Cashbox magazine for the third week on November 1st. In Billboard magazine, Slippery When Wet went to number 1. Quote, we sort of lived a life of a number 1 band for a week on the road, Bon Jovi says. Doc McGee, our manager, was coming to Sioux Falls, South Dakota. He missed his connection in Denver and was told there were no more flights. He rented a Learjet. The promoter said, why don't you all take it tomorrow to the next city? He paid for it. Every promoter was ecstatic. They had seen us struggling. And that's, by the way, also, if you're familiar with 80s metal, you've heard of Doc McGee before. He was responsible for so many different groups. As a matter of fact, if you saw The Dirt, Motley Crue, there's a scene where Doc McGee talks about, the guy playing Doc McGee talks a little bit about some of these different bands that he's been, but specifically how Motley Crue was the worst of all of them. But anyway, let's see. Every promoter was ecstatic. So every promoter for a week seeing Bon Jovi concerts sell out paid for a ride on the Learjet. Bon Jovi says, quote, it's the only thing we've ever done in excess. It ended Saturday night. It was a lot of fun. Quote, I came home Saturday night and sat in my 1-bedroom apartment on the beach. I have to borrow a car if I want to get around. My cars are put away for the winter. They're not winter cars. The band is much more comfortable any day in the local bar and grill than I'd ever be in the Palladium, unquote. Bon Jovi started touring in mid-July, a month before the album was released. The first 5 weeks they opened up for 38 Special, headlined the rest. Quote, I wasn't crazy about opening for somebody at first. It could have been awful, but it wasn't. They're the classiest people I've ever had the pleasure of working with. They're going to be dear friends for a very long time. By the way, if you ever saw 38 Special in concert, they were a pretty cool band. I saw they were a really classy band. They were tight. I don't know. I kind of always had a soft spot for 38 Special. I love some of their stuff. The tour, running through the first half of October, also took the band to Canada, Japan, and 2 festivals in Europe. Touring resumed November 7th in Europe and returns to America in December. Bon Jovi was born in Perth Amboy, New Jersey, and has 2 brothers. He wanted to be in a rock and roll band as long as he could remember. Quote, sure, I admire Bruce Springsteen and always have. Little Steve Van Zandt is even more a role model, unquote. He began playing the guitar. Bon Jovi says, quote, the only reason I had to sing was nobody else could sing and play at the same time. I had to learn. It was pretty tough, but I got it down. He adds, the band in this way, shape, and form has been together for 4 years now, unquote. Bon Jovi lived in New York for a year and a half. Quote, I was a gopher in a recording studio. And by the way, this is what I was talking about a minute ago. Because when you hear the backstory of Jon Bon Jovi, he was a talented kid, just like it or not, like a lot of famous people, whether you like their music or not, there's a lot of talented people. And he was a talented kid, and he worked. He put in the time, and he put in the energy, and basically made it happen for himself. It's kind of, it's one of those just kind of inspiring stories where you've got somebody that just has a goal, and they're just hyper focused on that thing, and then they just push through and make it happen. I was a gopher in a recording studio. I made demo tapes that I've since had to pay back in cash. I knocked on every record company's door trying desperately to get a deal, unquote. A New York radio station put one of his demos, Runaway, on a compilation record. Runaway by John Bon Jovi got national airplay. When Mercury Records signed the band and Runaway was on the first album, the company didn't want people to think some other band had picked up the song, so the band was given the singer's name. Bon Jovi says, quote, "But it was very important to me it be a band and not a solo deal," unquote. The radio station wanted him to sign a release for Runaway. Bon Jovi says, quote, "But I knew too much about the business to sign that away. It wasn't my best song at the time. There were 8 or 9 I was shopping that are now in the garbage can. We're not ones to write and save songs for next year. If they don't make the album, they disappear. We don't want to harp on old stuff. Let's move on is our attitude," unquote. Bon Jovi was the name of the 1984 album. So he had that first solo album, and if you've ever seen that one before, it's one where it just has John Bon Jovi it seems like he was standing in the middle of the street. I've got it in the other room. But anyway, that's the one that they ended up putting the song Runaway on. 7800 Degrees Fahrenheit came out in 1985. That's the one that I was talking about earlier that I picked up. Both sold gold. Bon Jovi picks all the single releases. Quote, "If it happens to be good, and if it doesn't, it's my fault. Let me make or break my own career," unquote. The current single, "You Give Love a Bad Name," was number 8 and climbing on the best-selling chart of November 8th. And this is what I mean. So because as you recall, back in these days, they would put an album out, but not everybody would buy the album. A lot of people would just buy the singles. You remember singles. I've got hundreds of them in the other room. And as a matter of fact, I think I have a few singles from this album. And then the singles would chart, and then they'd put a single out, and then the radio stations, rather than breaking out the album, would just get the singles and they'd play those, put them on carts or play the little 45s. And then those things had become famous and popular. And you remember they'd have the top 10 during the week and that kind of thing. And so this is before they put out the single for, I don't know why I keep forgetting. It's old man brain living on a prayer. This is before they put that, quote, single out, which was a few months away. And then it's not that they weren't popular. That's what I'm saying. That's when that song came out. That's the one that was like, whoa, this is a whole nother level that they went, because that song still resonates. Let's see, number 8. At concerts, he says, quote, "You see bands where it looks like they have a glass window between them and the crowd. There's none of that with us. I've been pulled into the crowd many nights because I got too close. That's the fun of it. People are nice. They just want to take pieces of you home. Nobody's trying to hurt anybody. If somebody jumps on our stage, nobody grabs them off. I hand them the mic and say, go ahead, sing. Sometimes it's a lot of fun if they don't choke," unquote. And that's actually, again, this is kind of a really cool personal thing. And that's actually even become a famous thing. You'll see videos where Dave Grohl with Foo Fighters will go out of his way to, call people up on the stage just randomly and have them play with them. And it's endearing. It's actually kind of a cool thing. And like him or not, Bon Jovi has that type of attitude about his performance. And it's just kind of again, for me, he seems like a cool guy. And there was this just part of his personality that I just kind of always liked. Bon Jovi writes songs with band guitarist Richie Sambora. Quote, "We decided what we'd really like to do now besides Bon Jovi is write for other bands. I don't have time to be on the street hustling them. Somebody recommended giving them to a third party who does that for a living, who will hoof the songs." So anyway, that's, again, I whether you're a Bon Jovi fan or not, if you remember this period of time and how big this album ended up getting, it's interesting to get a little snapshot into John Bon Jovi and what was going on at the time and what he was thinking and how his life was just in this process of where the first 2 albums had sold gold, 500,000 copies. He was just putting something out that now was going to send him to a completely different level of fame, where this album was going to go multi-platinum. And amazingly, who would have ever expected that it would still be resonating around the world to this day? Anyway, hey, thanks for taking the time to watch this video. Please follow the channel, like the video. And if you remember this stuff, I'd love to get your feedback on it. If you actually liked this stuff, because I did at the time, I was into this kind of thing way back when. And what are your thoughts about this style of music and Bon Jovi specifically, and what he was doing, and also interestingly where he went with his career? Because one of the cool things that he did later on was, if you ever saw the movie U-571, which is a great World War II movie, he's actually in it, and just for that long. But John Bon Jovi's in it, and he's just cool. He seems like he's a cool guy. Anyway, love to get your feedback on all this stuff. Please leave your comments below. And with that, have yourself a fantastic day.